Haskell raises himself up from the floor, looking into the bathroom. Horrified, he weeps, a man broken. Haskell's awakened by pounding on his trailer door. He's got a headache and can't deal with anything till he's had his fix. He pours a hit out on his binder and washes it down with a shot of whiskey, cursing the man still pounding. He can't be bothered to pay attention on set of his D-list vampire show, falling asleep during filming despite the coke in his system. The lead actress's shrill scream wakes him just in time for his phone to vibrate. He covertly goes to answer it. It's his old friend Milton Green. Milt can barely hear him, and Haskell mentions he's on set, and his leading actress is having a meltdown, or that might just be the scene. Milt can't believe he's supposed to be the director. He orders Haskell to see him after they wrap. He's got important news for him. Haskell agrees, and just in time too, as the lead actress actually does have a meltdown when she can't get past the talking she's hearing in the background. Haskell quickly ends the call and runs back to set. Like every proper alcoholic, Haskell takes a long swig of the bottle of whiskey before he heads in to see Milt. Milton's not impressed with Haskell's performance on Immortal Blood and questions him about it, and it's obvious from Haskell's response that he couldn't give less of a crap about the show he's currently working on. Before he walks out, Milton warns him that there are changes coming up, and he isn't going to like them. Lauren's woken by a thumping sound coming from downstairs. She gets up to find Haskell slumped over at the bottom, struggling to get his jacket off. She helps him up, walking Haskell up the stairs, wondering what the heck's going on with him. He slurs about having lost his phone, but when she checks his pockets, it's right there. He slurs a grateful thanks. When she gets to the top, Haskell collapses, sobbing and mumbling about a meeting tomorrow. In a dreamy haze, Haskell wakes to Cello smiling down at him. She bids him to wake up. Haskell wakes to real life, saying good morning to Cello's cat instead. He gets to his meeting at Lifelike, a biotech company run by David White. David's shocked Haskell came, just about as shocked as Haskell is about David's intention to diversify into making movies. David introduces Haskell to Richard Valentine, one of the most popular actors in the world, but Haskell's not impressed. Haskell's lucky to work with C-listers these days, but David thinks that can change. He pulls up an image while talking about the woman displayed, Cello She. She was something truly unique, the most compelling actress of her generation. David believes her is still a mystery. He explains it's hard to understand the why without knowing the who, which is why he wants Haskell to reveal the true story on screen. These types of avant-garde films are exactly what Haskell used to be known for. Richard interrupts their conversation briefly to introduce himself in the most pretentious way possible, handing Haskell his card and returning to texting mindlessly in the corner of the room. Haskell's already figured out that guy is meant to play him. Haskell laughs, admitting he's ended up liking David more than he planned to. David confesses that Milton warned him what to expect. Haskell's introduced to the other members of David's team, more pretentious people he doesn't care for, and after a poor introduction, an Asian girl enters the room with someone that looks eerily like Cello. Haskell's world fades in volume. He can't hear anything of the girl's explanation. David explains this is to be the star of the movie, a robot they're branding as Life Dolls, that looks exactly like Cello. Yi-Song, head programmer of the project, explains the dolls can't reason or perform by themselves. They have interactive protocols that allow basic conversations, but Lifeform doesn't specialize in AI. David intends the movie to be a promotional tool for the dolls, for when they roll out to the public as film collectibles. Haskell is in complete shock, unable to take in anything the corporate vampires are saying. David clears the room, apologizing for his suddenness. Haskell pounds urgently on Cello's mother Alice's door, confronting her about selling Cello out the moment she answers. She stops him before the pity party begins, reminding him Cello was no saint. Haskell knows this better than anyone, and partly blames Alice, who doesn't deny she was a bad parent. She looks at what Cello's done to Haskell, begging him to move on and let her go. A crash and a child's scream coming from inside the house reminds her she's got the grandkids this weekend, and they cut their conversation. But before Haskell leaves, Alice begs him to make the movie, to reveal who Cello truly was in those final moments, and to not let them ruin what's left of her. Haskell picks up pictures of Cello, admiring them and pondering. He remembers them getting dressed at home before heading to the Oscars, and how nervous Cello was about her nomination for Best Actress that night. Haskell drinks himself into oblivion, and dreams Cello's ghost sitting on the floor, recounting the memories trapped in the frames. She comfortingly tells him to go back to sleep. Lauren finds him, taking the frames from his sleeping hands. While Haskell shaves, he can see Cello's ghost in the bathtub, and his mind flashes back to that night again. Cello won the award for Best Actress, quite the birthday present. Haskell was wondering where he'd put the damn thing. The couple laugh and share kisses to celebrate, and Haskell pesters Cello to marry him again. Although she playfully declines, she can't help but admit how truly happy she is at that moment, and she wants to celebrate with a hit of coke. With a smile, Cello tells him she wants to end it tonight. Milton and Haskell review the script for the movie, and both agree it's garbage. Milt breaks it to David that they won't get Haskell without buying into his rewrite. Milt worries about how the doll is going to be able to perform. David explains the dolls are precise mimics, they'll act how they're taught, and Haskell gets the idea of asking Adriana Sloan, a director turned producer and friend of Cello's, to teach the doll. If anyone can get it to be Cello, it's her. Haskell meets Adriana on the set of her show, greeting her with the teasing line about her actors. He skips the formalities and the inevitable lecture about how successful her show is, and tells her he's got something way bigger for her to work on. He begs her to meet with him tomorrow at 9 for the full pitch, as the NDA he signed won't allow him to tell her what it's about. Adriana's reluctant at first, but caves when Haskell admits that the event is so big, it scared him sober. Haskell pours a drink as he sits to write, the memories already beginning to flood in again. He recalls how Cello out of her dress, excited to join the 27 Club, as she calls it. Her birthday is only hours away. She reminds him she always wanted to go out on her own terms. Haskell can't stand the recollections, and desperately wants to drink to make them go away, but he resists temptation, pushing away the glass. Lauren arrives home, struggling with groceries, and makes a sarcastic retort when Haskell doesn't even shift to help her. After a minute of banging around in the kitchen, he finally gets up to greet her. Hesitantly, Haskell tells her about the biopic about Cello, and Lauren immediately curses. She hates how obsessed Haskell still is with her. Even though they are the same age, in his head, Cello's remained young and perfect, Lauren can't compete with that. Haskell passes out at his desk, and Lauren wakes him the next morning with a spiteful slam of the door. He jumps up, cursing about the time. Lauren offers him breakfast, but he declines, running late for his meeting with Adriana. He quickly bids Lauren goodbye, unable to even notice her irritation. Adriana is unnerved by the cello bot. Yi-song explains the doll's 7 modes to Adriana, and sets her up to perform a short scene so they understand how she's to be taught. Haskell gives her a cue, Adriana gives her a line, then they run it back. The doll performs it exactly, and Adriana is disconcerted by its realism. David admits the companies tried hard to bridge the uncanny valley between robotic and human. David assigns Yi-song to assist them in maneuvering the doll on set, referring to it as number 8, and Haskell is aghast to think he made 7 other dolls. Adriana questions whether Haskell's thought this through. He'll have to live through everything again. But he claims he's already seen the end of this movie, he just needs to make it. With that, Adriana leaves, wondering how she's going to explain this to her wife. Haskell puts his nose to the grindstone working on the rewrite. Lauren watches over him quietly from the corner of the room, fully aware her presence is going unnoticed. The next morning, as Haskell prepares to head out, he notices a letter on his desk from Lauren. It's a goodbye letter, stating she's taken her stuff, and Cello's cat, and left, unable to compete with all the ghosts in his life. Adriana greets Richard at their first rehearsal by seizing his cell phone. Her number 1 rule is no phones on set. Richard's petulant, finding every reason to complain and threatening to call his agent. Haskell wants Richard to run a scene with the doll, just to see who has more personality. Richard's far from enthused. Yi-song boots up the bot, and they perform a scene from Haskell's memories, where he and Cello met in a back alley at a film festival. Haskell remembers the way they wildly made love before they even knew each other's names, the way Cello eagerly dropped her panties for him. They'd introduced themselves after, and he'd learned it was her first festival. He talked to her about the struggles of being a director with artistic integrity. Festivals and critics loved him, but back home he was practically unknown, since giant robots and explosions weren't his thing. Cello had confided she didn't go to screenings because she'd hated seeing her giant face. Haskell persuaded Cello to come back to his hotel for the night, to miss her flight the next morning, and they kissed passionately, but when Richard gets to the kiss scene with number 8, he pushes it off. Richard's revolted at the idea of having to deep-tongue a machine, complaining he saw no notes of that in the script. Adriana reminds him that he's got love scenes with Cello for this movie, and when Richard starts throwing a tantrum, Haskell jacks him up, reminding Richard he isn't the star here, the robot is. Richard could be easily replaced, so it's in his best interest to man up and do his job. Yi-song steps outside while packing up number 8 to take to the studio, and notices Richard fiddling with his phone. They engage in idle chit-chat till Richard takes advantage of Song's prowess to help him get his car to the studio. Song glances at the phone and with one click of a button, she fixes the problem. Before Richard leaves, he asks Yi-song out to dinner. Despite him making comments and pronouncing her name wrong, she surprisingly agrees. Haskell dreams of coming home to Cello, who asks if he's ready to tackle the movie. He admits he's not, and she tries encouraging him, with the idea that it'll be their second movie together. Haskell retorts that it's the closest they'll get. Like the robot, Cello asks for her line, and Haskell wakes with a huff. Haskell looks over the set, not liking how it's lining up with his memories. He orders Josh from production to remove a few elements, and gives him the keys to his place to fetch the original couch from his living room instead. Haskell needs everything to be perfect, exact. The makeup artist is unnerved by how perfect number 8 Second's skin is, and the hairstylist is sure the hair is human. The hairstylist wonders why the robot has sexual organs, curious now, as it dawns on him what the robots might be made for. Just as he's about to inspect number 8 Second's anus, they're interrupted by a crew member calling for the main actress in 10. They filmed the scene where Cello gets news she didn't get the part for a superhero movie she'd auditioned for. They'd said she was moody at the meeting. The doll gives a wonderfully lively performance, insulting the other actress who got the part with Cello's exact intonation, and climbing on top of Richard with Cello's playful body language. Haskell watches in amazement. It's as if she's come back to life. He cuts the scene right after number 8 kisses Richard, who gratefully shoves the thing off him. Inside his trailer, Haskell curses uncontrollably till he gets winded, needing to sit down. Adriana bursts into his trailer, ready to scold him for his unfair outburst. But when she catches him gasping for air and slowly breaking into a sob, she's more concerned he's having a heart attack than anything. He confesses she was right as he sat there watching the scene. It all came rushing back to him, and he couldn't bear it. Adriana's face softens with sympathy. Yi-song puts number 8 on charge when Richard enters the trailer. Yi-song reminds him he's not supposed to be in there, but cocky as he is, Richard doesn't believe rules apply to him. He walks up to number 8 and gropes its breasts, noting how remarkably real they feel. Richard notes how proud Yi-song is of her creation. He worships her work as he seductively leans in closer. He pulls Yi-song in for a deep kiss, and she succumbs, but then pauses, looking anxiously at the robot. Richard chuckles, flipping her round, telling Yi-song to let her watch. When Haskell arrives to set the next morning, he finds everyone treating him unusually kindly, hugging him and being pleasant. He wonders what's up with everyone, and his assistant director lets him know Adriana told everyone he had a microstroke yesterday. He decides to distract himself from the urge to strangle her by filming something. While setting up for their next scenes, Adriana interrupts the staff to enforce her phone rule, reading out the offender, Jerry's, dirty texts for their entertainment. After their brief laugh at Jerry's expense, their merriment is dampened by an unexpected visitor, Blake Seidel, the man who wrote the original garbage script. Blake antagonizes them about which version they're going with, arguing that their narrative is all sentimentality, and that Cello was a sociopath who never reacted to her father's passing. Haskell is sick of Blake's know-it-all attitude and tells him off. Witnessing Haskell's passion, David agrees that their version is more cinematic, and with that, Adriana kicks them both off her set. As they film, number 8 perfectly performs the scene where Cello breaks down crying and slowly reins her grief back in, remembering she needs to steel herself to deliver her monologue. The scene is executed with such intense, human emotion that it leaves Haskell and the crew breathless yet again. They cut, and Haskell stares, bewildered at the machine, when suddenly she winks. He recalls how he got the name Calvin from Cello. She'd wanted to call him what his friends did. She tries to call him by his middle name, but it turns out his middle name is Eddie. He reveals his name is Vincent Edward Hobbs. Haskell Webster is his favorite cinematographer. Cello thinks the nom de voyage is clever and decides to call him Calvin, in reference to Calvin and Hobbes. Haskell asks Ken for a minute alone with number 8, and despite some apprehension, Ken heads out of the trailer. Just looking at it brings back memories of Cello, of how she'd said there were no happy endings unless they made them. She'd claimed she wanted to be the best actor in the world, and she finally had an Oscar. Cello had insisted she didn't want to be a young widow fading into obscurity, but rather she wanted to snuff out her flame while it could still burn her fingers. Haskell looks into number 8 Second's eyes, wondering if Cello's truly in there. The robot tilts its head, asking for its line. Adriana interrupts them, ready to film the next scene. This scene depicts Cello calling Haskell, begging for his company and comfort after her father's passing. She hadn't seen her father in 2 years, and he'd collapsed at work with no warning. She'd begged Haskell to come to London, and when he refused, she decided to go out clubbing to spite him. He recalls his own revenge, where he'd slept with actress Vanessa Henstridge, taking photos of their affair. Cello found out about the event over the internet while on her plane back home. She'd burst into the studio where Haskell was shooting with Vanessa and made a scene as she confronted him about cheating. In Cello's mind, clearly he thought this was more important than her, and unable to take that accusation, Haskell smashed one of the lights on set. Cello tries instigating Haskell to hit her instead, but when that doesn't work, she antagonizes Vanessa into doing it and ends up cracking her nose. Haskell pulls her back, confessing that she's the most intoxicating, maddening woman he's ever known, and he hates she forgets that. He asks her to marry him again. Cello insists she won't marry him, or anyone else, but she does love him. As Haskell cuts the scene, Ken thinks it's a shame they can't end the movie there, but Haskell knows it ends where it ends. Adriana catches Richard on his phone on set, and doesn't miss the opportunity to seize his device and regale everyone with his private life. She calls them to attention, but as she starts going through the phone, she finds at least 6 female staff members on there. She reads out the most recent texts with an unsaved number, which happens to be Yi-song, and it's an embarrassing conversation where Richard cannot even remember her name, and admits he's sleeping with every woman on set. Adriana pops in on Haskell to let him know the distributors hate the title for the film. None of them can pronounce it or know what it means. Haskell isn't surprised. He is surprised when Adriana announces Milt is there to see him. Haskell knows it can't be good if Milt's there in person. Milt cuts to the chase, informing him that Seidel is blackmailing the film. He dug up dirt on Cello that he's threatening to release. Milt hands Haskell a copy of a coroner's report. Haskell's in disbelief at what's written on the paper, thinking it's impossible. It's revealed that Cello was pregnant when she passed, though Haskell can't fathom how. Milt informs him Seidel's demanding a pile of cash to keep it secret, and that they do his version of the scene they just shot, a false version where Haskell hits Cello in front of everyone. Haskell refuses, Vanessa gave Cello the black eye, and Seidel knows it. Milt knows it too, but Adriana and David still want Haskell to be the one to decide. Before Milt leaves, he tries to comfort Haskell, mentioning that Cello probably didn't know. The memories bombard him of Cello sleeping in his car seat, about the day he asked her to work with him, and how excited she was. As they come flooding back in fragmented flashes, he turns the car around. Yi-sung visits Richard at his home, trying to confront him about all the other women he's slept with, but to no avail. Richard makes it abundantly clear he doesn't care for her, and is an overt womanizer. Haskell drunkenly stumbles into number 8 Second's trailer while it charges, turning it on. He caresses its face, asking Cello if she's in there. He's researched the Turing test, and found that AI deemed smart enough to pass can also be smart enough to fail on purpose, and clearly he thinks that's what's happening with number 8. He's of the delusion it's hiding its intelligence so humans don't hurt it, but when it doesn't reply, he sets it to learning mode and feeds it lines of a scene he's invented, where he converses with the ghost in Cello's machine. He has it say she's been waiting for him to notice her, that she's here, that it's all going to be okay, and she loves him, but after that, she runs out of lines. Haskell curses, begging Cello to talk to him. But number 8 has run out of dialogue, and only repeatedly asks for her line. He gets angry and starts hitting the robot, punching it hard enough to knock it off the charger and take off a chunk of flesh. He passes out, and in his drunken dream he recalls how he promised Cello he'd be there for her in her last moments. When he wakes, he apologizes to number 8. Haskell dreams about the petulant, childish side of Cello. He wakes, cursing at the alarm. The next day, Ken apprehensively reconfirms whether they're really shooting Seidel's scene. Richard comes up to him to talk about his new lines, shocked at the rewrite, telling Haskell it's ridiculous because he knows he'd never hit Cello. Haskell agrees he wouldn't, but Richard's character would, apparently, and encourages him to do his job. A crewman calls number 8 to set. They'll need her in 10 minutes. Yi-sung is pissed, not just at Richard, but at the extra work she's found on her plate today, with a skin patch and a low battery. While filming the scene, number 8 goes off script and rails into Richard, calling him selfish, entitled and soulless, slapping him in front of the entire cast. Some clever crew members catch on quickly as they realize Yi-sung reprogrammed the bot with her own words, exacting revenge on Richard for his womanizing ways. Adriana pulls Haskell aside to talk to him about the new scene, admitting she's disappointed in his decision to go ahead with the filming. She feels it's an act of self-sabotage on his part, that he's trying to punish himself for something, but she refuses to let him bring her and the entire production down with him. Solemnly, Haskell admits he was there when Cello passed. Adriana thought Haskell simply found the body, but that was a cover story engineered by Milton. He was there the entire time. He puts a recording of the scene up on his screen, which Adriana quickly questions him about. Haskell confides he didn't know Cello's plans. He thought they'd just shag in the tub. The scene shows Cello picking up the straight razor and confessing to Haskell she wanted his face to be the last thing she saw. It also documents his promise to be with her at the end. Adriana wonders how many times Haskell's watched this, and he admits, too many. Haskell heads back to set, his world spinning with the nostalgia. Cello had admitted she was scared, and he tried to tell her not to do it. But that just gave her courage. She started splitting her, and by the time the adrenaline perked Haskell up, it was too late. Haskell's mind was addled with panic, and all he could do was weakly ask Cello to stop. With her last few breaths, Cello called for him, begging him to be by her side, but instead he passed out by the toilet. Adriana weeps at the sight on the screen. She finds Haskell and calls it a wrap for the day. She wonders why he never told her. He admits he never told anyone till now. Haskell huffs, trying to restrain the stinging tears, but as Adriana reaches out to him, he sobs softly in her arms. Haskell visits number 8 again, asking it kindly to help him out with something. He takes it home, sitting it down gingerly and turning it to conversation mode in an attempt to talk to Cello again. It introduces itself as Cello She, 27 years old, born February 29, 1988. Haskell fixates on the fact that its math is wrong, figuring they didn't tell the robot Cello is deceased, but it isn't her fault. He turns it to review and perform, and shows it a clip. Haskell recreates exactly the scene of Cello's last moments. He relives her one last time, her playful cynicism, her maddening stubbornness, her rehearsed but epic final monologue. This time when he promises to stay with her, he keeps it. Haskell does what he should have before. He takes the razor from her hands, apologizing that it took so long. She claims it's okay, that she loves him, but when he asks if it hurts, she's run out of lines. With a sigh, he mimics Cello's actions and sinks into the water, caressing her face with his final breath.